Story 1. The Screaming Flail. I awoke to find myself in a darkened passageway. As I sat up from the dusty floor and rubbed my head, I realized that I had no memory of who I was or how I got to this strange place. No matter how I got here, I felt I needed to get out and fast. The passageways were like a maze that led nowhere. It was as if I was stuck in a castle in Europe or something. Great, I can remember Europe and castles, but not my own name. How pathetic was that? Anyway, I traveled down the halls for God knows how long until I reached a dead end. I couldn't believe my luck, so I turned back in search for another route out of this hellhole. Upon coming across an intersection of passages that I passed through before, a thick mist and a soft light appeared to the left of me. I looked and saw a tall, well-built figure walking down the hall towards me. At first I was relieved. Thinking that I had been saved, I waved and shouted at the man, trying to get his attention, but all I got in return was silence. Soon, however, what felt like excitement turned to dread. As the mist surrounding the man parted, I could see he wore an old military uniform of some kind. I couldn't quite remember of era, but maybe like the 1600s, maybe earlier. I didn't know. I just couldn't put my finger on it. What was clear was that he was headless. It was clean off his shoulders with a smooth edge. I then began to notice that sound. The horrible, screeching sound like something metal against a chalkboard. I then SAW. In his right hand he dragged a large handle that was linked to a chain. I couldn't see what was on the end of that chain at first because of the mist, but as the headless man in uniform came closer, I began to hear groaning and high-pitched panting. Without warning, the headless figure took a swing at me as a large metal-looking ball with spikes came at my head. As it swung, a low and high-pitched scream echoed through the halls. I managed to dodge backwards to avoid it while the spiked ball got stuck in the stone wall. Once I regained my breath after the shock, I looked up to find the spiked ball was not a ball at all. It was a human head cast in iron. The face on the iron head was that of agony and pain. The mouth was open to reveal a metal tongue, and the eyes were closed shut. What sort of thing was this? I thought to myself. With one huge pull, the figure freed the iron head from the wall as it screamed again. It then threw its arm back and swung at me again. As the spiked head screamed that god-awful scream, it missed, only hitting the space between my legs without a scratch. The face on the iron head looked right up at me, and then it suddenly opened its eyes to reveal horribly bloodshot eyes. The head began to scream again. It was so loud I thought my ears were going to bleed. The figure pulled back on the chain, getting it unstuck a second time. Before I knew it, I was sprinting down the hall like a bat out of hell. I don't know how long I ran, but I soon found myself in what I believed to be the center of T. Maze. It was a four-sided corridor of some kind with what I thought was a bottomless pit in the center. I almost fell in when I stumbled upon this place. As I slid to a stop, my feet dangled above the darkness below. For a moment I looked up and saw even more halls above the one I was on, but no sunlight at the top. I then heard the footsteps of the thing coming up from behind. I looked up, and an arrow on my shoulder to see him, the mist parting as he approached. I thought I could get away. I had two options, right or left. When I was halfway up onto my feet, however, The stone bricks that held the floor of the hall began to collapse like dominoes. It started on the opposite end from me. I was able to hear the loud crack that began to affect. The floor caved in all around me. I was left on a narrow pathway, like that of a pirate's wooden plank. The figure then slowly approached at me. As the thing neared, I heard the dragging of its bizarre weapon. I was left with two new options: jump and hope to live, or stay and die for sure. And so, without thinking much longer, I jumped into the abyss below. As I fell, the headless thing looked down at me, dangling its head on a chain above the darkness as it did. I then woke up in my bed screaming, shooting up until I was seated upwards. I was in a cold sweat and breathing hard. I rapidly looked around the darkened room, but nothing was out of the ordinary. Nothing was wrong in the apartment. My memories came flooding back to me. My name was Stephen Tyler. I remembered everything now. As I lay back on my bed, I sighed in relief. It was just a dream. Oh, thank God, it was just a dream. I gently drifted back to sleep. I smiled as I did. In the morning, I got up and went back to my old routine. I brushed my teeth, took a 20-minute shower, made myself some breakfast, and then got dressed in a suit. I remember I worked for a law firm downtown as a paralegal, and so the day started out like any other. That was until I opened my door. Out in the hall, police were everywhere. Past my door and down to the apartment at the very end of the hall. Flashes blasted the light shadows of the hallway as pictures were being taken. In the doorway of that apartment, I saw a group of people who all had jackets that said CSI. They mumbled to themselves about something, but they talked so loudly and all together it was hard to hear what exactly they were talking about. Just then, my neighbor from the apartment to the left of my own came up to me and said, "Yeah, they just showed up like 5 minutes ago. The superintendent called it in no too long ago. What's going on here?" With a loud sigh, my neighbor replied, "Well, I guess I lines be the one to tell you. Apparently, old Mrs. Bitterman was murdered last night." Murdered? Yeah. Beaten to death with some sort of large, heavy object. I overheard one of the cops talking about the details. I also heard they believe she might have been killed sometime in the middle of the night, but I didn't hear anything last night. Did you? The neighbor exclaimed. I thought it over for a moment and said, "No, I didn't hear anything from her apartment. Sure, I woke up from the weirdest dream, but I didn't hear a damn thing." A detective walked up to the two of us. He looked us over for a moment before asking, "Which one of you is Stephen Tyler?" "I am, sir," I replied. "Did you hear anything last night?" the detective asked, as I was just telling my neighbor here. I said, pointing to the neighbor, who then waved at the detective, "I didn't hear anything." "Okay then, and Mr. Tyler, do you have any enemies, Mr. Tyler?" the detective asked. What kind of question was that? What did I have to with the murder of Mrs. Bitterman? Sure, we were neighbors, we chatted, said hello in the hall, but I barely knew the woman. And why would I have any enemies? True, I worked in a law firm, but it's mostly a desk job. Very few of our clients are even aware of my existence. My family was normal enough, and I had great friends. Why would I have enemies? I told the detective that I didn't have any enemies. He then asked me to follow him to the apartment. After passing through the crowd of people, I saw the scene. There were large holes in the walls, blood splattered everywhere, bloody boot prints on all over the floor, and poor Mrs. Bitterman being taken away in a body bag. How could no one hear what did this horrible thing? And finally, to my horror, my S went wide open after the detective pointed it out to me, a message written in blood, which read, "One life for another, Stephen Tyler, my God, did the thing from my dream kill her? Because I live, tell me it was just a dream." Story 2. The lights on the southern edge of the small town of Ranville. There is a wide unlit road that separates the town from a wild and thick forest. 3 houses are in the northern edge of the road. They are the homes of the Peters family, old Mrs. Abernathy and Joshua Daniels, respectively, and they look out across the road upon the forest that the sun can scarcely pierce. Many travelers who have taken the road late in the evening have confessed to feeling a peculiar sense of uneasiness as they pass the trees in the darkness, their stories shared in hushed whispers amongst the children of the town that speak of an evil presence lurking within the woods. Apart from the occasional incident of missing cattle, no apparition of maliciousness has ever befell Ranville, and so the town slumbers peacefully beside the gargantuan labyrinth of ancient oaks. It was in the early days of autumn that the men came and installed lights up and down the road that cast their luminous light into the trees. It was a welcome change to the residents of the road, who hoped that this would ease any feelings of insecurity in the darkness. Any wronged owers who had previously made mischievous plans for the road would surely be exposed and foiled, and so the residents hoped for a good night's rest, while the additional light took a little getting used to. They all slept easy that night, except for Adam Peters, the son of the Peters family, who had horribly unpleasant dreams. But that is often the case for children. When confronted with any sort of change the next morning, the residents all agreed that the lights were a blessing sent from above. On the third night after the arrival of the lights, Mrs. Abernathy sat in her chair by the window, reading from her book. She was always of restless spirit, so it was not an uncommon occurrence for her to stay up until the first rays of sun peeked up from the horizon. On this particular evening the clock had just passed 1, and her mind had begun to drift from her literature. She looked out of her window upon the illuminated street. Everything seemed much clearer to her, and she took some small pleasure in watching the trees creak ever so slightly in the wind. The leaves engage in subtle, ritualistic dances, and the branches swayed unsteadily. Then something caught her eye, some bushes that didn't match the natural rhythm the others seemed to share. It could have easily been some nocturnal animal of the wild attending to its business, and yet Mrs. Abernathy felt uneasy. Perhaps it was the result of her imagination captivated by late-night reading, but she could swear she felt that the more she watched the disturbance, the more she felt that she was being watched herself. Slightly disturbed by the ordeal, she drew the blinds and returned to her book in an effort to take her mind elsewhere. By the time morning came, she had forgotten all about her late-night observations. As the sun was beginning to set the following evening, Adam Peters was playing alone on the road. The lights had not yet came on, and so he found himself in the ill-illuminated haze of dusk. The wind was of mild temperament, but still possessed a bitter and icy bite. It was not the ideal situation, as he would have much preferred to find entertainment indoors, but his mother's insistence had driven him out, and, to the cold autumn air, he was eagerly anticipating the moment that the lights would spring to life and his mother would fetch him to return indoors. The hours of play had been almost entirely devoid of fun and were replaced by a mysterious sense of uncertainty. He was without an inkling of doubt that something was not as it should be, and yet he could not fathom what it could be. His dreams of late had been terrible in nature, and he suspected that this was influencing his mood. As he sat in reflection, he began to feel the hairs on his neck stand up. Adam felt the all too familiar sensation of someone standing directly behind him. He immediately turned himself around to discover there was nobody there. This was perplexing to Adam, as he was certain he could sense the presence of another person. He scanned the neighboring houses, and there was no visible signs of any other residents going about their business outdoors. Just as he was beginning to doubt himself, he heard the voice of his mother calling for him. He was relieved that he would be able to return to the comfort of his home and stood up at once. He ran up the front steps, crossed the porch, and entered the house. As he was closing the door, he made one more attempt to identify the mystery presence and was once again unsuccessful. The road was completely deserted. Later that night, Joshua Daniels awoke from a peaceful slumber by the unpleasant sensation of dryness of the throat. His thirstiness evicted him from his bed and carried him downstairs to the kitchen, where he fetched a glass tumbler and filled it with water directly from the tap. The clock in his kitchen told him that it was nearing 3, which irritated him immensely, as he knew his remaining hours of precious sleep would be insufficient for the day ahead. Just as he was switching off the kitchen light, he heard a faint yet distinguishable tapping noise coming from the road outside. He was intrigued and unsettled by the noise coming at such a late hour. In his freshly awakened state, it took him a little time before he came to a realization about the nature of the noise. He was hearing the sound of footsteps crossing the road as they got increasingly closer to the side of his home. A looming sense of dread grasped him and held in place, as it was an almost unheard of occurrence for someone to be taking the road at this hour. The footsteps stopped, and Joshua remained petrified in his kitchen for several minutes until he was able to muster the courage to approach the window. It took a great deal of bravery to pull back the blind and peer out into the newly lightened road. However, his bravery offered him little in the way of answers. There was not a single person that Joshua could see anywhere, in the gardens or the road or the forest. He hastily made his way to his door to ensure that it was locked. He then made his way upstairs to spend the hours until the sun rose with the light on, convincing himself that he had been imagining the whole event. It was the unfamiliar coldness of her house that awoke Anna Peters the next morning. Immediately she sprung from her bed to investigate why her house felt so alien to her. She walked down the stairs and was at once struck by the alarming sight of the front door wide open to the elements. The feeling of her security being so harshly violated was enough to bring her to tears. Making her way over to the door, she began to notice strange marks on the floor. They were violent and teased into the wood, as if someone had attempted to maintain a grip to the floor while resisting some pulling force. In an instant of pure fear, Anna knew exactly what had happened, and she let out a deafening scream that woke most of the town. Her husband appeared to her aid within moments, and through uncontrollable bursts of terror she pleaded him to check on Adam's room. When he entered his son's room, he confirmed the darkest fears of his wife. Their son was nowhere to be seen. He sprinted out into the middle of the road, desperately calling his son's name, but to no avail. Perhaps if he had not been so distressed, he would not have overlooked a torn piece of his son's shirt that hung nonchalantly on the edge of a bush at the mouth of the forest. The rest of that day was a tempest of confusion, anger, and fear for the residents of the road. Many of the men of the town were called upon to search for the young boy, but hours upon hours of searching offered no clues to his fate or whereabouts. Joshua didn't speak of the events that had befallen him the night before, due to some combination of fear, denial, and guilt, but it did motivate him to take some sort of action. He emerged from his home with his tool set and set about deactivating each and every light that had made them feel so safe. Joshua knew now, as did the other residents, that sometimes it is best for the darker places of the world to remain unilluminated. Stephen Trotter, Story 3. The beginnings of a truly haunted house. I was alone, I was always alone, though I could feel eyes watching my every move. I was more alone than I had ever been. The walls were cold cement. I had a pretty good feeling that I was in a basement because there were no windows. It was just me, the mirror, oars, and the TV. That television had no buttons, no way for me to control it. It came on and shut off against whatever will I had. It showed me horrors, torture, illness, death beyond my wildest imaginings. It showed me peace with nature and happy people. It showed me mundane things like moths, porch lights, and windowsills. Sometimes it just went to that awful fuzz that one gets when the TV loses signal. The mirrors were worse in them. For days, maybe a week, though it felt like much longer, I could see myself wasting away. I was dying from thirst, hunger, and insomnia. Reconditions, I had to relieve myself in the corner. The white bed sheets were stained with my grime. I could always see myself, but what I couldn't see was a door. I didn't know how I got in there. I didn't know why. It was driving me crazy. I screamed. I broke the bed frame of the bed. I tried to break a mirror, but only blooded my hand. One day, when I could barely move as I stared at myself in the bed, the TV came on. A man in a giraffe Halloween mask said, "You're free." It was like the clip was stuck on repeat, though he chanted it over and over, but there was no way out. There wasn't anything I could do to make him stop or to escape. When I broke down in tears, one of the mirrors pulled away like a sliding glass door, and there was the man. I tried to get up, but I was too weak. He grabbed me under the arms and hauled me up. He was strong. I asked him why he was doing this, but he didn't answer. I begged him to answer. I begged him to let me go. I begged him to stop. Instead, he took me to a bathroom just outside the room. He washed me. He fed me. He gave me water. After closing up the room I was in, he set me in a chair facing the doorway. I could see in the room. It was a two-way mirror after all. He flipped a switch somewhere behind me, and all suddenly the mirrors in the room weren't mirrors at all. They were windows across far. Oh me, there was an empty room. It had a bathroom and a chair just like the one I was in. As the man grabbed my arms, I looked into the room to my right. There was a man there with his head bowed. His hair was long and hung in his face. He was so thin, I could count his ribs. Across from him, in the room to my left, there was a younger guy. He was less thin, but still ghastly. He was looking right back at me with hopeless blue eyes. He was tied to his chair, too. We all were in identical rooms. "What is this?" I asked in absolute horror. "Why are you doing this?" "At least," he answered me. He said, "I'm raising a demon. That room, the one you left, that is the one you will die in. Not tonight, but soon, when I get the last man, when he has weakened and he thought of death in that room of his own accord, when he has been free of it a week, when I bring you all together, taking your freedom away in that room, I will summon him with your demon. Enjoy your brief freedom, Danny." With that, he left. I yelled and screamed for him to come back. I demanded to know how he knew my name, but he never answered. He just left me there. The next time I saw him, he came in through the empty room and cleaned the room he planned to kill us in. He cleaned every mess I made and even repaired the bed frame. I saw him a few times after that. He would come in, take me into the bathroom, still bound. He would wash me without a word. He would feed me. He would let me drink water. After which, I was right back where I started. I saw him do the same with the other men in the other rooms. The man with the long hair barely even lifted his head anymore. The other men barely ever looked at me. One day, when I was sitting there thinking about my fate, the man walked into the empty room across from mine. He turned around and dragged a body in after him. It wasn't long until he took a new man into the room with the bed. He laid him on the sheets and left. The mirrors returned as he flipped a switch on the wall of the empty room, and dread truly set in. I had to watch as some other man wasted away. I couldn't hear him as he screamed, cried, and watch whatever was on the TV. The giraffe man came in every now and then to go through the routine of bathing, feeding, and watering me. I'm sure he did the same with the others. Eventually, the other man was trapped in bed as I had been. He seemed to be in a daze as the TV flickered on. He was collected as I had been. He was taken out of the room, and with the door wide open, I could see the giraffe man caring for him as he cared for the three of us already in his basement. When he was in the chair, the giraffe man flipped the switch. This time the long-haired man was looking at the man in the chair. The other man had his head hanging low. I felt as frantic as the look on the guy's face when he saw us all. Eventually, the giraffe man closed the door and left. When he came back, he cleaned the room again. He continued to silently keep me alive, along with the others, for who knows how long. It must have been a week at least. That's how long he said he would keep us anyway. He walked into the room where he kept the man with the long hair. He opened the door and left. He went to the room with the man that was there before me and opened the door. He came into my room and opened the door. Lastly, he went to the new guy's room and opened the door. He walked to the center of the room and told us cheerfully it's finally time. He dragged us by our chairs into the room one by one. Three of us pleaded with him. The man with the long hair was silent. The giraffe man ignored us. Instead, he hummed a merry tune until we were all gathered around the middle, after which he loudly called out, "I release you." I don't think he was talking to any of us. The lights in the room flickered wildly. He started chanting something I didn't understand. The long-haired man moaned in horror. The new guy and I were pleading and yelling. The other man was anxiously looking around the room. The giraffe man slid a silver dagger out from under his shirt. The blade was so polished that it glinted and flashed in the lights as they jolted on and off. He went to the long-haired man, and the lights flashed. In an instant, the man was gurgling up blood from a slice across his neck. Giraffe man went to the guy that was there before me and did the same to him. I knew it was my turn. I screamed and screamed, but no one was there to save me. I was dead before I really knew it. In fact, I don't even remember dying. I remember the blood-soaked blade at my neck and darkness. When I woke up, I was here in that same room with those 3 men for company. We're good friends now, but we're still trapped. Our entire existence is trapped. We're stuck here, waiting until someone destroys the house or rids it from the demon within. We rarely see the demon, though he likes to roam the rest of the house. He looks a lot like the giraffe man. Part of me wonders if he died with us. Another part of me wonders if he's just upstairs. The basement hasn't changed. But the only time I've seen him is when the demon comes howling through our room in his guise. Story 4. Handbook for the Study of the Unknown. Handbook for the Study of the Unknown by Professor V.I. Hayworth. Chapter 1. Beginning Precautions. There is an eternal problem that plagues those of us drawn to the study of the darkness. It is our innate humanity. For to the creatures of the darkness, human is synonymous with prey. For the average citizen, this is no trouble. Because of a defense mechanism, Wattower Eek has stood us in good stead over the thousands of years, and no doubt it is the reason that humans exist anymore at all. It is our ability to block from our consciousness all those things which are out of the ordinary. For all these supernatural threats are far from ordinary, and to a one, they can only sense what senses them first. It is awareness which tempts and attracts them, like the motion of a mouse's tail attracts a cat. These facts make the study of these creatures all the more perilous for those of us who take up the cause, due to the rarity of humans who notice them, much less seek them out. We glow to them like beacons in the night. There is no way to block the light of our awareness. There is a way to disguise our human natures, and thus be able to continue our studies in relative safety. Before you begin your learning in earnest, it is vital that you perform this ritual to keep yourself safe on your journeys. It will also grant you certain powers which you will find invaluable as you continue forward. First, you must summon one of them. It is imperative that you select something small and weak, so that it does not overwhelm you. I recommend minor shades if there are no children in your household, as they are simple to control and summon, requiring only a small creature such as a mouse to distract them from attacking you. However, if a child is present in the home, they will ignore all other living beings and attack them exclusively. For this reason, despite the relatively higher risk they pose, full shades are preferable in such households. It will require a sacrifice of your blood to keep them from attacking, but it is well worth it. I have included the summoning rites for both. At the end of the Ain ritual, simply use the one appropriate to your situation. Before you summon your shade, you will need to take a bath containing the following: 1 cup of sea salt, preferably Dead Sea Sal, tea if you can get it, 3 drops oil of myrrh, 1 spoonful dragon's blood powder, actually a resin product, 1 handful of leaves or needles from the tree most common in the place you were born, preferably red, gathered from around your childhood home. Soak in this for at least a half hour, then towel off with a clean new towel and put on clean new black clothing that has never been worn before, even to try it on. Go to a place where you will not be disturbed and make precaution, such as locking doors and closing windows to preclude intrusion or escape. Take a stick of white chalk and inscribe on the floor a circle large enough for you to lay down and with your arms and legs stretched out. Draw within this first circle the summoning sigils for the shade you decided upon. Scribe another circle around this about 6 inches larger and fill it with various protective runes, and another circle around this which should be large enough for you to stand comfortably in. As you should leave blank. Thus all light save for a single candle placed on a shelf or table to the north of your circles. Place the blood or mouse at the southernmost part of the inner circle. Also be sure to place a broom in the circle. Stand in the outermost ring of your circle. At no point during the summoning part of this ritual should you leave this ring. You should especially cross the protective ring till you are sure you wish to complete the ritual. At this point you should proceed with summoning your shade. Once it manifests and is preoccupied with the mouse or blood, observe it for a bit, its motions and attributes. You must decide now whether or not you wish to continue. If you do, step across the protective ring into the center with the shade. If you do not, step out and turn on the lights, banishing the shade. Beware, however, if you choose to back out now, for this shade now knows you and is likely to lurk in the shadows of our home and will pose a danger if you are unwary. If you have decided to continue, stand at the north point of your circle, between the shade and the candle, to cast your shadow over the shade. Chant the following: Umbra, Phasma, Ada, Animus, Phasmatus, Atra, Atrum, Univorcis. Continue to chant it repeatedly. Notice that the shade and your shadow are now starting to combine, the delineation between them softening, the shapes shifting. At this point the shade may begin to struggle. Pay no heed and keep going. If it breaks away now, it will devour you. Keep chanting until it struggles no more and your shadow has settled back into its normal shape, though it will seem darker now. You will feel a desire now to go finish eating the mouse or drinking the blood. Do so, as it will further cement the bonding. You will find that you can no longer cross the protective symbols. Use the broom to sweep enough of them away to open the circle, and go blow out the candle. The darkness will no longer keep you from seeing. From now on the creatures of the shadow will see you, but they will not notice your humanity. You will be able to see in the darkness, but light will burn your eyes if you do not protect them. You will be able to go unnoticed in crowds, especially at night. However, there are a few cautions. If you summoned a minor shade, you should avoid prolonged time spent in the company of children, lest the hunger of your phantasmal partner overwhelm you. If you summon a full shade, it is advisable to avoid blood when in polite company. House, you will have an overwhelming desire to drink it. In either case, the only food that will tempt your appetite Any more will be meat, raw and fresh, preferably still living. I have found keeping mice and rats to be a satisfactory method of keeping myself sated, and highly recommend the same. Summonings. To summon a minor shade, you will need 1 mouse in a small cage. Draw lines radiating from the center of the inner circle, 13 in all, alternating between capping them with a circle and an arrow head till you get to the last one, which should point to the mouse. This you should cap with a box and place the mouse cage within it. Take up the candle and put your hand between it and the inner circle, casting a shadow on the floor in the middle of the Sioux. Morning sigils. Walk clockwise 3 times around the circle, attempting to keep the shadow in about the same spot. Chant the following as you circle. Aliquantulus umbra desdem. You should see as you circle a small shape coming out of your cast shadow. Complete the full 3 circles. Then stop and hold absolutely still till the creature has fully emerges and flows up the line to the mouse. Continue the ritual as outlined above. To summon a full shade, you will need 1 empty bowl, 1 knife sharp enough to cut you. Draw a rough shape of a human being on the flow or within the inner circle. Mark the head with a circle, the hands with triangles, the feet with rectangles, and the center with a 9-pointed starburst. Place the empty bowl within the circle at the head. Pick up the candle in your left hand, standing with your right hand towards the circle. This should cast your shadow on the floor in the middle of the summoning sigils. Walk clockwise 3 times around the circle, beginning and ending. Before the bowl, chant the following repeatedly as you walk. Grandis umbra desdem. You should see as you circle a large shape coming out of your cast shadow. Complete the full 3 circles. Then stop and hold absolutely still till the creature has fully emerges and flows up the line to the empty bowl. It will then rise till it stands as tall as you. Do not speak to it. If it speaks, do not respond. Look deeply into the spot where its eyes glow red, and cut your hand, holding it into the circle just enough for the BL oot to drip into the bowl. Once the creature bends to drink, proceed with the ritual as outlined above. Story 5. Father Cook. Part 2. I want to hold your hand. Magister Alexander laughed at me. This never gets old. He picked up the pages I had printed off the internet and shuffled through them, while shaking his head. If I had $1 for every time somebody screwed up a summoning spell, I'd be able to retire. It's not funny, I cried. You have to help me. I can't help you. And if I could, I probably wouldn't. It is up to Father Cook to decide if he wants to help you or not. He used the pages to point to the priest sitting on the stool across the workbench from me. I can give you some advice, though. Next time you want to summon an imp, don't print the writ. You'll off the internet. He tossed the pages onto the table in front of me. Lesson learned. Now, are you going to help me or not? This really hurts, I whined to Father Cook as I gestured to my left arm that was held into large metal vice grips. One grip held my wrist while the other was clamped just below the elbow. It was the only thing I could find to keep my hand from causing any more trouble. That's why we were gathered around a workbench in my father's machine shop. My left hand responded to my pleas by giving me the middle finger. I'm with Lefty, Magister Ale. Xander smirked. I can help you, Father Cook said, but what reassurances do we have that you won't do something like this again? You might not be so lucky next time. Trust me, I tried to sound as convincing as I could under the current circumstances. I have learned my lesson. Please just get it out of my arm." Father Cook stared at me for several seconds as he made his decision. "Since we are already here, we might as well help you." He sighed and then opened the large leather bag sitting on the table in front of him. "I hope you have suffered enough to have truly learned your lesson," he added. "I doubt he has suffered as much as the neighbor's dog did," Magister Alexander pointed out. "That wasn't my fault. The Magister was acting as though I had actually killed the dog. It was the hand I just leaned down to pet him like I always did. The thought of what happened to the dog made me sick to my stomach. I hung my head in shame, only to glance down and notice the blood and flecks of viscera that still stain my pants. If you summoned it, then you are responsible for it." Magister Alexander folded his arms over his chest, his face full of contempt. My left hand gave a thumbs up to his comment. "If you aren't going to help, at least be quiet," Father Cook chided his partner, while he removed 3 items from his bag: a flask filled with a clear liquid, a small Bible, and a simple wooden cross. Once the items were laid out on the table, my left hand began to frantically gesticulate with my fingers. I could only guess this was some form of sign language. "Lefty has a point," Magister Alexander stated after interpreting what my hand had spelled out. "What did it say?" I asked. "He claims that he is the real victim, and he shouldn't be punished for your stupidity." He turned towards Father Cook. "Lefty wants to plead his case. I don't see why we shouldn't let him." "You have got to be kidding me." I couldn't believe he was going to waste time listening to that thing. "It's my hand, true, but he claims to have information that might change our minds on how we handle your situation," Magister Alexander countered. "It's a hand. What could it possible?" "No," I balked at the idea of my fate being decided by what my left hand was going to tell them. "You aren't in any immediate danger, and your problem is entirely your fault. I agree with Magister Alexander. I would like to hear what it has to say," Father Cook said. My left hand made a fist and tried to pump it in the air to signify its victory, but the vice grip kept it from moving very far. "Screw you," I scoffed at my hand. It responded by slowly raising its middle finger. Then it began to spell things out to the Magister in sign language. "One moment, please." Magister Alexander held his finger up while he pulled out a notebook and a pen. "Okay, you may proceed." We sat in silence for about 15 minutes, while Magister Alexander transcribed everything that was being said by my hand. When it was finished, it clenched into a fist, except the pinky, which was fully extended. Magister Alexander made the same gesture with his hand and locked his pinky around the pinky of my left hand. "Pinky swear," he explained when he noticed Father Cook's raised eyebrows. "Let's see what we've got." He read over the notes. "Interesting," he said when he was finished. He handed the notebook to Father Cook. "Very interesting." The priest agreed after reading it. "What?" I blurted out. "What did it say?" "Give us a moment." Magister Alexander stood and indicated to Father Cook that they should step away from the workbench and speak in private. They talked in hushed voices for several minutes. At one point I thought I heard Father Cook say, "That's a bit harsh, don't you think?" That made me very nervous. Large beads of sweat started to pop up on my forehead. As I waited for them to finish deliberating, both men returned to the workbench, but neither man sat down. Magister Alexander stood with his hands behind his back, a smirk on his face. So I finally asked, "We've come up with what we think is the best solution. Given the new information your hand has presented us with, we are, of course, going to give you a chance to explain," Father Cook said to me. Okay, I was starting to feel a little relieved. "What did it tell you?" "There has been an increase in the number of spells and rituals popping up in the dark corners of the internet lately. We have been called in to deal with a few delicate issues relating to them, your current predicament included." "What does that have to do with me?" I didn't know how the thing in my hand knew what I had done, but I wasn't going to admit it. It was my word against it. I'm a victim just like everyone else. You are a victim of your own stupidity. It has bound to catch up with you eventually. Magister Alexander scolded me. "Did you really think we wouldn't find out?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop feigning ignorance." Father Cook held up his hand to silence me. "Our little friend has told us everything you did. How could it possibly know anything? It's a hand," I argued. "It's a possessed hand." Magister Alexander corrected me. "As such, it has access to your thoughts and memories. It just happens to be stuck, unable to move anywhere else in your body." But I tried to explain, but I couldn't think of anything to say that would change their minds. I was caught. "Fine, I did it." I admitted I was using them to trade for the summoning spell. "I didn't know they'd be posted online for everyone to see. Now, can you please help me?" I pleaded. "We will," Father Cook said as he collected his things and placed them back in his bag. "But you aren't going to like the solution we agreed upon." That sounded ominous. "You aren't going to perform the exorcism on my hand?" I asked Father Cook. "No, I'm not," he said. "Magister Alexander is." I thought he couldn't exorcise demons. I was confused. Even more so as I watched Father Cook place a syringe, a roll of gauze, and a few other medical instruments I didn't recognize onto the table from his bag. "I can't," the Magister responded. "We decided the best way to help you and to ensure something like this never happens again is to limit your ability to practice the arts." He then revealed the large hand so he was holding back into his back. "That is why I am going to exorcise your hand from your wrist." My left hand gave an enthusiastic thumbs up when it heard that. Story 6. The Pocket Watch. When I was a child, there was nothing to eat. I was the eldest of 5, so it was my job to make sure that I always let my brothers and sisters eat before me. War was inching inward from the coast, and as it marked hid closer, our food grew scarcer. Animals fled the area or were slaughtered and consumed in panic by the other families in our village. My father was a wise and cautious man, and so we waited to slog either or 2 chickens until the fall, when grass and tree bark had become too hard to find or inedible. The other families knew we had chickens, and father stayed up all night, every night, to watch over them. He had to kill at least one boy from a neighboring town who had gone mad with hunger and tried to burn down our small home with a burning branch. When the chickens were now aught but bones, and the bones had grown brittle and porous from mother's many soups, my parents sent my 2 eldest siblings and I out to collect bugs and field mice for supper. We were hungry, but not quite starving until one morning we woke to the first frost and there was nothing alive left to eat. My parents began to discuss the inevitable. Perhaps my father should go to the costa and sell his father's pocket watch to one of the drunken but well-paid soldiers. It was the only thing we had of value, and the only family heirloom my father had to pass down to me. I didn't want him to go. I was afraid war would arrive while he was gone, and I was too young and too weak to protect my mother and younger siblings. I begged him to stay, but he insisted it would be all right and promised to be back within 2 weeks. I was so scared that, when he and mother were outside preparing his satchel, I smashed the pocket watch under my foot and placed it back in my father's half-rotted desk. My mother cried for days. Father did his best to comfort her as I watched them peel the leather from my father's boots and boil the hide for dinner. The next night, mother found a dead raw tea and boiled away the disease with the new fallen snow from outside. The next evening, she filled our bellies with rat bones and more melted snow. My little brother Albert kept everyone awake that night. Crying over his hunger, he begged for all the things we'd eaten when we had a garden and animals. Beef stew, white rolls, succulent corn, and spiced lamb. He made all of our stomachs moan and torture us, and I soon screamed at him to be quiet while my mother sobbed from her room. Father stroked Albert's hair for hours, and then went back into his and mother's bedroom, shutting the door behind him. Albert moaned until the thin light of dawn peeked through our threadbare curtains. I could hear Father in his room, tinkering with the watch. My hunger had long worn out my fear of soldiers, and I silently prayed that he could repair it. Father worked on the pocket watch all through the day and into the night. Celia had found dead crickets in the walls of the abandoned bakery, and as we ate them, Father emerged from his bedroom with Mother right behind. The smile on his face was one I had almost forgotten, as I'd not seen it since the day my youngest sister was born. He told us that he had repaired grandfather's watch and that he'd heard of a soldier encampment nearby. 3 days, he promised us. 3 days, and I will return with carrots, lamb, and rolls, so big they'll fill our bellies for a year. We clapped our hands in delight and ran around our small dirt yard with a glee that seemed a foreign language to us. Father said that we were all to help Mo to find beautiful things with which to dress the table. The next morning, he gave us all a piece of rubber from the sole of Mother's shoes to chew on and sent us out on our mission. After kissing us goodbye and promising to be back before we'd remembered he had left, we had such fun that day, gathering horseshoes and shards of broken glass. We threaded bits of twine through the horseshoes to hang above the table and tied the glass to the ends, hoping they would shimmer in the lamp light. We returned home as the sun set, happy with our day's work and eager to return to it tomorrow. We weren't yet in sight of home when I first smelled onions, chicken broth, spiced lamb, even sweets. I ran as fast I could, dropping our table dressings carelessly along the way in my maddening pursuit for food. I burst through the door to find Mother at the stove, preparing our meal in a quiet reverence. I threw my arms around her and asked if Father was home already. Yes, my love. He had the fortunate chance of meeting a wealthy mercenary on the road who was only too happy to buy your grandfather's watch. I hugged her even tighter and sat down at the table as my brothers and sisters came spilling through the doorway. They found their places quickly, hungry, expectant looks upon their faces. Father came out of the bedroom and took his seat at the end of the table as Mother Bro awed over a steaming platter of spiced boiled lamb. She nodded at us, and we filled our hands with the rich meat, hardly bothering with our plates. After dinner, we were sent to bed with full tummies, barely a word having been said by anyone since our food had been set on the table. We ate our fill the next night, and then the next, and the next. But as our food stocks started to dwindle, so did Mother's health. Each day bled more out of her until we were left fighting over scraps of raw meat while our mother lay weak and wilting nearby. The first night I went again without food was the end. Height that the hazy, happy ether began to lift, and my memories of the past few days became confusing. I recalled that the spiced lamb I'd consumed with such ferocity had actually been sickly sweet, and the accompaniments I had first smelled from afar had never been brought to the table. I couldn't remember Mother eating anything in all the days since Father had returned. Instead, she sat quietly next to us at the table, staring at the pile of gray meat we consumed with such fervor, and Father. I couldn't recall hearing his voice since the morning he had left for the soldier encampment. His chair had sat empty night after night, and as the peripherals of my memory formed shape, I couldn't be entirely sure he'd ever been there at all. At least not since the morning he had cut pieces of rubber from Mother's shoes at the table. Frightened and starved, I didn't find sleep until the darkest hours of the night. The following morning, when Mother emerged from her room, I asked where Father had gone. She told me he'd left to become a solider and sent us out to peel bark off of the bushes in the forest. Father never returned. Perhaps the reason I didn't realize what happened back then was because it was too awful to consider, and I was so very hungry. But Mother died a few days ago, and in death she thrust the truth upon me. From her stock of meager possessions, I was bequeathed a small box that contained nothing more than a shiny, broken pocket watch. Perhaps she wanted me to remember it all, the only hope of our survival that I'd smashed under my heel, my father's last loving hug before he sent us to collect dressings for the feast, the overly seasoned gray meat, and the rancid smell that had begun wafting out from under Mother's door, becoming more pungent each day. My father sacrificed more for his family than most ever would. I used to lament that I had nothing to remember him by, no family heirloom to pass down to my own children. But now I have his pocket watch, a thing I cannot give to my children, not because the glass is shattered, not because the gears are cracked. I cannot part with the watch because it is a curse that I must bear, for the shiny, contorted metal has never lost the sickening smell of that sweet, silvery meat. Story 7. Binary DNA, they say when you take a picture of someone you capture their soul in the camera. They also say if you print it off, that picture contains the soul itself, and you can control them with it. I'm not sure where to start. Do you know what the primordial soup is? A veritable ocean of elements, all floating around randomly, and through millions of years of time, eventually the right set of random circumstances came to pass, and the elements were able to connect together and form the world's first single-cell organism. Now that's a really boiled down version of it, but I'm sure you get the gist of it. Fast forward a few billion years to the early 1990s, when internet use began to rapidly accelerate. Every home had a computer, and new connections between computers were opening on a by-the-second basis. Trillions of bytes of data began to transfer around the world at the speed of light, music, text, sound, and most importantly, pictures. Now, when you take a picture of someone and capture their soul, what happens when that picture is converted to data and placed on a hard drive? Does the soul follow 15 years later? We believe so. We believe that when you take a picture of someone and upload it onto your computer, to the image data, a blueprint of the person's soul itself is imprinted on the file itself. Look at your pictures folder. How many souls reside in that folder alone? That's just the beginning. Though, these soul blueprints each retain pieces of a puzzle, parts of the soul itself as well. Recently, a group of hackers who referred to themselves as the Cardinals took an interest to this theory and began experiments. They found anomalies within the binary sequences of images based on similar features of the person they had taken a picture of. A binary DNA, if you will. Now these hackers had come to possess a set of 3 extremely important data files, one AVI, one JPEG, and one .mp3, each of which possessing interesting unexplainable qualities. The first, cradle.avi, depicts what AP appears to be a group of teenagers with a low-quality video camera exploring the basement of a house. The quality of the video is distorted completely beyond any comprehensibility, and the video is very low quality. For most of the video, the camera is passed around the group, handed back and forth and jerked around too much to make anything noticeable out. But near the end, the camera turns at an odd angle, and you can semi-clearly make out a young girl standing in the corner facing the wall. Her hair is long and black, and she is wearing some form of white dress. You only see her for a split second, but many people who have seen the video claim there just seems something wrong with her. A bit deformed, but not in a way anyone can explain. But the truly peculiar property of this video is what happens to the user's computer at the end of it, on the last second of the video. If not already so, the video will force full screen itself. Along with this, you are left with a 1-second looping clip of a window in a wall. It loops 15 times, and then the girl is seen again, standing on the other side of the window with her back to the viewer, slowly wavering back and forth. After a few moments, the video ends and the user's computer permanently shuts down. Inspection has shown that the entire registry becomes completely corrupt, requiring the user to do a total wipe and reinstall. The second file is known as needles.mp3. This sound file, when played, plays for about 3 minutes. It is extremely distorted. One can occasionally make out some form of voice talking, but most of the sound is some form of growling, rolling, crackled roar. Users who listen to this file often experience extreme nausea and loss of balance for a brief period of time. The final file is known as burningman.jpg. The file name has nothing to do with what the actual picture depicts. Instead, it just displays a haphazard mess of overlaid and macheted images of dolls and a hallway. There also seems to be an image of a man standing, with his head cast down in the background, but the image is too distorted to make anything out, much like the other files. The image, when downloaded and opened on a user's desktop, will proceed to stay permanently open on whatever program it is opened through. Not only that, the program becomes disabled, nothing else happens. The image just permanently sits there on your desktop, and clickable and minimizable, and you're just left there with the man's invisible gaze staring at you. From what the group of hackers were led to discern, this file seems to have precompiled into the data something along the lines of CMDW, yet as complex and intricate as the program as it works across all OS platforms, no one can ask who the original creator is. In fact, few people have heard of it, as the file is uncopyable nor sendable. This, in fact, further adds to the mystery, as often receivers of this file will obtain it from random anonymous emails posted on forums on a download link, posing the question, how was that poster able to upload it? If you ever see any of these files, refrain from downloading any of them. They all have varying detrimental effects on your computers, from practically taking out your whole registry, corrupting System 32, freezing your mouse, or crashing your computer. Now onwards, this group of hackers, the Cardinals, took to analyzing these three files and comparing their odd behaviors. They had heard of other such odd files, images, data, etc., but were never able to get their hands on them, at least as far as we know, though rumor states they in fact were able to locate and collect all the known files like the original Smile.jpg, Barbie.jpg, even suicidemouse.avi. Not even the grifter was able to escape their grasp, rumor states. But rumor also states the grifter video even exists, but that's another story. Nonetheless, all these files in hand, the group lined the files up and began to meticulously work through the binary 10/1 at a time, checking for similar strains and series of binary that matched, and they did manage to successfully do so. At least legend states the result were 7 individual execute files that did nothing. Simply a gibberish pile of O South and 1 South, they endless puzzle over the files, each tackling and execute each. They decided to name them after themselves: lust, gluttony, greed, envy, sloth, wrath, and pride. At last they attempted to line the files up. Remarkably, something odd happened. The copies of the files quite suddenly mashed together. The result was a single complete execute already named, barely breathing.exe. And what of this file? Well, not much. LSE is known after that point. They were too smart to just execute it. They analyzed the file every possible way. Hex, binary, conversions, anything to figure out what this odd file would do. To no avail. Even after forming together, it was an even bigger jumble of 1 South and O South, and made no more sense than the separate executes. They backed the file up on a flash drive and proceeded to run it. That was the last command found run on their destroyed computers. A week later, their corpses had been disfigured beyond recognition. Description of the corpses stated that it almost seemed as if they had and brutally slashed across their faces and arms. Every square inch of skin that had been bare had been mutilated, almost microwaved, and then sliced repeatedly by a micro-thin razor. The government attempted to hush up the event, but there was some media leakage, and because the Cardinals have been keeping a blog amongst themselves and a few close friends, it's closed down and deleted now, so do. And go trying to find it, it quickly spread out as per what they had been attempting to accomplish, and if it was or was not related to their terrible deaths. And what of the flash drive? Fr. Yend, who knew of its existence, later checked the home of the group and was unable to find it. According to reports, the drive was found in the pocket of one of the group and had been taken into custody by the police and then simply vanished. The trail continues on. Far more, though, the file resurfaces every few weeks around the globe. Governments attempt to cover it up, but some media chaos, of course, look to the news for people mutilated in their own homes by a murderer, their computers stolen, etc. And if you ever get a cryptic email with an attachment labeled barely breathing.exe, for fuck's sakes do not open it.